I would like to welcome Doan Winkel to today's webinar. A few words about Doan. He's currently the director of the Muldoon Center of Entrepreneurship at the John Carroll University, and also the president of the United States Association for Small Business and Entrepreneurship. His aim is to give students a voice and motivating the younger generation to tackle their dreams through creating their own careers, which is, I think, especially important the more regular jobs are dispersing in the universe. So everyone has to take his or her career into his or her own hands. So that's really, I think, very much needed. But he's also inspiring teachers. For example, he has founded the Teaching Entrepreneurship org platform where you can download teaching interventions as PDF and implement them in your own teaching. This is something that the Intrinsic project is also developing, a kind of a platform where teachers can download interventions to be implemented in their own teaching. So we're going to present this platform in November at our conference. So this webinar today is going to focus on how teachers could enable students to rediscover or tackle their dreams with regard to their own careers. So Doan, maybe you are also inspiring us with regard to our own careers. So there is still a career to be made, right? So welcome to our webinar series, and we are very much looking forward to your presentation.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me, Andreas, and thank you everybody else for taking a little bit of time to join us this morning. A little bit of background on me, as he mentioned, I currently lead the entrepreneurship program at John Carroll University. It's a smaller Jesuit university in Cleveland, Ohio, in the United States, in the Midwest, kind of right in the Great Lakes. And a little extra bit of background to kind of give you some context of where I come from with all this. I grew up in a household where my father was a mathematics professor for about 40 years at some of the most successful, well-known engineering schools in the United States. But he was a very different kind of mathematics instructor. He didn't give tests. He would make students write essays. He would have students, mapping out equations on the tile floor using sort of fuzzy pink boas. And he would talk about, Michael Jordan and Homer Simpson and the kind of things that were interesting to students. And he would make the mathematics come alive for students in ways that were meaningful and applicable to them. And so that's the household I grew up in, and that's the approach to education that I was exposed to at home. And I'll never let him forget it, because I had a horrible educational experience, because I saw what education could be at home, and then I tried to do that and encourage that and find that in our educational system in the United States, and I never did. So it was a very frustrating experience for me, because I always wanted to ask why, and I always wanted to dig deeper. And in my experience, teachers didn't want that to happen. And so I really had a horrible experience as a student. And that's part of what led me here, is that I wanted to create sort of richer and more meaningful learning experiences and growth experiences for young people. Along the way, I've said that I've also been more of the hustler kind of entrepreneur, certainly at a younger age. And so I just sort of fell into this entrepreneurship education thing, a little bit by accident, a little bit by plan. I really enjoy sharing my perspective and encouraging others to think a little differently about the role that we have and how we execute on the opportunity that we have. I really feel very blessed at the opportunity I have, and I try to take it very, very seriously and continue to be humbled, by the impact that I have the opportunity to have on young people. And so that's kind of the approach that I wanted to talk a little bit about today. We'll talk a little bit about some specific tools and all that, but a lot of this really is a little more about the approach that we take and how we can maybe readjust how we see what we do, right? I did want to mention, and I'll probably mention it at the end again, that one thing I always want to make sure to say is that if I can ever be a resource for any of you, I'd be happy to do that. If I can jump on a call and talk through a course or some exercises, I'd be happy to do that. Look over a syllabus or whatever, I'd be happy to do that. Talk at your university, happy to do that, right? So please, please, please do use me as a resource if I can be of service or of help to you, okay? So first and foremost, today I wanted to say thank you again for having me here and taking some time to listen to my rambling. Okay, hopefully there's some good value that you get out of it. The ultimate goal that I try to accomplish, one of the ultimate goals I try to accomplish with my students is to help them find a little bit of happiness. I think that in education, and again, my experience with education comes from a purely United States perspective, right? And I understand there's some differences here across different cultures and continents and whatnot. But, in the United States, there's a lot of just rote learning going on. And there's a lot of routinization of education and standardization and all these kind of things. And I think we've lost a lot of the opportunity to enjoy it and to find some happiness in how we learn and what we learn and how we apply what we learn. And so I think education or entrepreneurship is the perfect vessel with which to kind of reorient and help people enjoy learning and enjoy growing through learning and find a little bit of that happiness, right? I'm a big fan, if anybody else is, of Dr. Neck, Heidi Neck at Babson. And she talks a lot about these 5 practices of entrepreneurship that she thinks are just sort of the critical foundation. And it's the first one that she talks about often, and the most misunderstood one and the most sort of strange one that we need to work on is play, right? There's empathy and creation and experimentation and reflection are the other ones, but the play is, to me, and I think, I don't want to speak for her, but I think she would probably agree, one of the more critical ones is play. We need to learn how to play and have fun and be happy again. And with entrepreneurship, I think we can do that. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about maybe helping to reorient students and helping to shift our way of thinking of what we do and how we approach what we do, okay? I also have a very deep-rooted belief that taking a sort of startup approach to entrepreneurship education in most places with this population and this demographic, this age of students, is really almost an irresponsible and almost dangerous approach to take. Because I think they don't oftentimes have the context to really actually go out and start something responsibly. And at least in the United States, a lot of educators and a lot of parents are not really good at giving critical feedback. And so instead, what we're doing is we're telling these young people that their really, really bad ideas are good, right? And that's just irresponsible of us. And I think it's dangerous because they don't know any different. So it sets them up for some pretty big failures that they don't see coming. And that just can be a really awful situation. So I take the approach of, there are some students, who do, in any university I've been involved with, who do go out and start businesses. Awesome. But the vast majority of students are going to go work for somebody else, and they're going to go work for somebody else for a long time if they do ever go out and start something. And so our approach, my approach, and what I've tried to instill at John Carroll is we take that mindset kind of approach to say, this is the way entrepreneurs think and do things. And you can use that to go start a business if you want, but you can also use that within a company as an employee or as a member of an organization, a nonprofit, a volunteer organization, a community organization. You can use that to create value for boss, employees, supervisor, customers, stakeholders, et cetera. So that's kind of the approach that we take, just to give you a little bit of context and background. So this is one of the exercises that he mentioned about on teachingentrpreneurship.org is a blog that I run with a couple buddies where we offer lots of free resources, exercises, lesson plans, all that kind of stuff. So this is one of them, and this is where I start all of my semesters, all of my educational experiences, is I spend time with students talking about purpose, right? Students who come into our classes passionate about entrepreneurship they're easy to engage. I find they're very easy to engage. But what I see people struggle with, and what I struggled with for a long time, was how do we engage students who aren't passionate about entrepreneurship, right? Either because they don't really understand what it is, or maybe they've heard like, this is kind of a fun class, you should take it, but they're not really passionate about it. We developed this exercise, and I've used this for many years to help students discover what it is that they're passionate about and to help them hone in on passion and purpose, right? And so it really helps students explore areas that motivate them at the end of the day. And it's focused on, interests that spark their curiosity, skills that they want to develop. And at the nexus of the interest in the skills, that's kind of where passion lies, right? Is the way that we've set this up. And then we talk about, okay, you've identified what you're passionate about. Now, what sort of people do you want to impact, right? What populations of people do you want to create an impact for? And at the crossroads of that passion and that impact is somebody's purpose. And so before we do anything in my classes, we go through this exercise and we spend a long time on this. We spend 1 and sometimes even 2 full days on this one exercise. And I think it's critically important because the rest of the semester, right, I'm going to be working with them, trying to develop some mindset and develop some skills and having them practice some skills. And if they can situate that within a purpose, right, they're a lot more motivated to do the things I'm asking them to do and to go to the places I'm asking them to go to, which can oftentimes be a little uncomfortable for them. And I just think it's a deeper, richer learning experience, right? So I strongly encourage people as much as you can to put aside some of the ways that people typically might start a semester or kick off a learning experience, and to pause all of that and take a little bit of time to situate what you're doing and allow young people to think a little bit about what is meaningful to them and start there. It really creates such a powerful experience, and they really, I think they seem to get a lot more out of the journey, that I personally try to take them on. And then what we do from there is we talk about curiosity and fear, right? So again, in the US, at the school I'm at, for the most part, the student population, they're going to go through these 4 years of an undergraduate, a bachelor's degree, and then they're going to go get a job somewhere, right? For the most part. And so what I want to talk to them about, and what I do after helping them figure out a little bit of their purpose and nail down on that, is talk to them about curiosities and fears. Okay. And I've found that one of the keys to engaging students is making the lessons and making the days personally relevant to them. Right? The more personally relevant I can make something, the deeper the learning goes. The easier it is for me to break through to them, the easier it is for them to translate what I'm talking to them about or the experiences they're having into, real sort of internal learning and reflection and all that. And so for me, and again, there's an exercise. I'll share these slides, and within these slides, you can find links to some of these exercises. For me, though, I try to discover, what matters to my students. And so I really ask them 2 very simple questions. One is, when you think of your life after college, what is it you're curious about, right? And so I want them thinking about, when I'm done with this place and I have to take a first step into the real world, what is it I'm curious about? And we go through this in a sort of design thinking kind of way, right? With Post-it notes and word clouds and all this kind of stuff. And we have them talking about it. And, shocker, there's not a whole lot of variety. They're concerned about jobs and money. They're concerned about where they're going to live. They're concerned about, how do I make friends in a new city, right? Like, and you always have some smart aleck who, they're curious about, how tall is the tallest building in Chicago, right? You have some smart alecks that get into the mix and have a little fun with it. But for the most part, they're talking about the things that are top of mind for them. And then the second question I ask them is, when you think about life after college, what are you afraid of? So we talk about curiosities and we talk about fears. And again, shockingly, they're the same, right? They basically are the same sort of answers that they come up with. And so it helps to situate the learning that's going to happen and make it very relevant to the students, because throughout the semester, I can then refer back and say, remember when we talked at that, in that first couple of days about, your curiosity about what kind of job am I going to get, right? And these lessons in experimentation, or these lessons in customer interviewing, or whatever it might be, here's how they directly will help you figure that stuff out, right? And so again, I'm able now to make what I do in the course very personally relevant to these students, okay? It also, again, helps just to mentally sort of situate them to see, okay, this isn't just learning. I'm not just learning for learning. I'm not just trying to, complete a test. This is stuff that I'm actually going to learn that's going to be useful to me after I leave here, right? And there's lots of stuff that's going to be useful to them after they leave. I just try to make it very directly obvious to them, okay? And so, when I ask students to sort of brainstorm fears and curiosities in this way, I do it individually, then I do it in small groups. The class comes alive, right? It starts to kind of buzz with this excitement. And then, when I ask them to come up and share some of these things that they've come up with, for me, and if you try something like this, it will really become almost instantly obvious how to make your course and how to make the topics in your course like 100% relevant to them, right? Because yours is the class and ours are going to be the kind of classes where the students get to learn about their curiosities and get to sort of allay their fears, right? And we can tap into that over and over and over again throughout the semester. And I just think it's one of those rare opportunities that not a lot of disciplines have, right? And so then again, right, they need this purpose. We focus on the purpose. We talk about some fears and curiosities, but then they need a purpose that's really challenging, right? It doesn't do any good to set goals that aren't difficult for them. It doesn't do any good to not really try and poke them and get them out of their comfort zone. And again, I think this is part of the uniqueness and the opportunity of entrepreneurship is we can push them as far outside of their comfort zone as we want. I oftentimes have to be very careful and very cognizant because I don't mind, and I have never minded being the first one to jump off the cliff without a parachute. I don't care. I also have to understand that these 18, 19-year-olds don't necessarily feel the same way that I do. And so I have to be respectful and feel responsible there, but I do want to push them outside their comfort zone. I think that's part of my job. I see that as part of my responsibility is to help them get used to some of that ambiguity and that uncertainty and that discomfort, right? And again, I think it's part of the unique opportunity of entrepreneurship. And so along that journey, I see us as guides, not educators, not necessarily even coaches, right? But more of a guide. I don't want to give them answers, right? I don't want to, give them that sort of continuous inspiration that more of a coach will do, or help them practice in the ways that a coach will do. I see it as sort of a guide, right? I want to let them explore. I want to let them test. I want to let them get uncomfortable. And I sort of help show them and help them navigate a path, but it's up to them. And again, I take a little bit of a different approach, but in my eyes, my students are paying to be there. So if they choose not to show up, that's their choice. That's on them. That's not me, right? And so again, I don't look at myself as that coach that needs to continuously, pump people up and all that kind of thing. I look at myself as this guide to say, if you want to go on this journey, I'm with you. If you don't want to go on the journey, that's your choice, right? You paid for it, it's your dollar or franc or, whatever it might be that you're paying, right? It's up to you. So I see us as being able to guide this journey and guide the journey toward a purpose that is a little bit challenging. And so when students, going back to that first thing about purpose, a lot of times young people, students, they'll come up with a purpose that isn't really well-defined or isn't really challenging. And that's why we spend so much time on that first exercise, because I have them go through it multiple times, right? And just like when we come up with ideas, the first ideas we come up with typically are just terrible, right? And so it's like, get rid of the terrible ideas, clear the cobwebs out, and then we can dig a little deeper and get into the really good ideas. Same thing with thinking about purpose and all those kind of things. First time they go through the exercise, it's a little ambiguous. It's a little, it's nothing too courageous, right? That they've identified as a purpose. And so I go, okay, great. Now let's go through and do it again. Right. And once we've figured out, and once I can, and you can physically see in them when they've found a purpose that's meaningful for them, they sit up a little straighter, right? Their forehead's not quite as wrinkled because they're excited and their eyes get a little wider. Once I've got that, I got them. I got them for the semester. They're in, right? And then it becomes my job to guide them towards that purpose using the skills and the lessons and everything that I'm doing, but it's all about that journey, right? And so along that journey, they need to learn how to be uncomfortable. They need to learn how to fail successfully. They need to learn how to fear failure, but fear it in a sense of not that it's necessarily a bad thing, but fear it because it's difficult. It's a difficult thing to experience, and it's a difficult thing to reflect on and process, but it's a really, really valuable thing, right? And really, who can blame them at this point? I mean, but at least again in the US, by the time these kids get to college, the threat of a sort of failing grade or failing in some sense has been used as a tool to ensure their compliance for years, right? That's the stick we beat them with in the US. And so they literally have been taught for years and years and years and years to fear failure, right? I want them to fear failure, not because it's a bad thing, but because it's a difficult thing, right? But I also want them to acknowledge and understand that it's a requirement. But it's just life. You're going to hit this wall over and over and over again. And so what do you learn from it, and how do you leverage it, and how do you use it? And so again, we spend a lot of time talking about failure. And the idea is, and what we talk to them about is making the most of any failure. And the way to do it, in my mind and my experience, is through reflection. It gets back to one of those practices that Heidi Neck talks about, right? And it's I find myself at a Jesuit institution, and one of the core tenets of this institution and this sort of pedagogy is reflection, right? It's critical. Once a failure occurs, right, I want students to take some time to identify what failed, why it failed, and then understand how they can improve it next time, right? And so again, we spend a lot of time throughout the semester failing. I mean, I purposely will set them up where they have absolutely no chance of success at small things. So they have to fail and they have to get used to it, but it's safe. It doesn't matter about their grade, right? The outcome is not based on success or failure. It's based on the reflection that they experience or the reflection that they offer, right, of the failure. And so here's another exercise that we use. It's called a failure resume, right? We borrowed it from folks at Stanford, and lots of other folks do some version of this. This is our version. So we ask students, and we go through this exercise, and we say, you're gonna look at and talk about failures you've experienced in school, failures you've experienced in work, in sports or clubs or competition, right? Something like along those lines, and then also in terms of personal relationships. And we don't always talk about this too publicly in class. I offer the opportunity, and some students take advantage of that and put themselves out there and be vulnerable, which is a wonderful lesson. And it again creates a different dynamic in the class. Once they start talking about their failures and they see that, number one, all of us have them, right? It's not like I'm different or I'm any worse because I have failures. Everybody's got them in all of these roles in their life. And then once they see that people are willing to open up and share about them, it takes part of the edge off of that, okay? Because in entrepreneurship, in any walk of life, you're going to fail often, right? But in this world of entrepreneurship, in the way that I position them for it, they're going to fail all the time, over and over and over and over and over again. And so the more I can get them used to that, and the more I can give them the skills to be able to reflect and adjust from the failures that they experience, the better off they're going to be, I believe, right? And so then part of that happens through this constant experimentation, right? Experimenting, prototyping, whatever you want to call it. We do a lot of this. And again, we start off in my courses, we start off very early with it. We have an exercise called the 60-minute MVP. And part of what we do is we have students build from scratch. We have students build a website that has a video embedded in the website that's enabled to take credit card pre-orders. And they launch this in an hour, right? And every semester it's done. It's super simple. All right. Now, these websites are not earth-shattering websites. I'll tell you, they're ugly and they're nasty and messy. But the lesson that the students understand from very early in the course is, number one, look what I can do. I did this in an hour. Most of my students, it's a liberal arts school, so they don't have a lot of technical ability usually, right? So they come in with zero technical ability, and they're able to collaboratively with students they may or may not have met before, launch a website that has the capability of showing a video to communicate a message, and has the capability to collect credit card pre-orders for a product in an hour. It blows their minds. And again, you can see this reaction in them when they understand what they've done. Point being, right, and then I layer this with failure, because all of these websites are a complete and utter failure, right? They're a disaster in terms of being a successful sort of tool to get any kind of marketing or orders or whatever of whatever products they've ideated around. Okay, but that's how we start the course, and then later on in the course, we have them build an app, right? And they can build an app with any of these tools within an hour's time, right? They can sort of design and launch an app and have it out there, and they're continuously experimenting and prototyping, and embedded within that experience, right, within this loop that we keep them going through, are the ideas of failing, of reflecting, of refining, of creating, of playing, right? All these kind of things that, again, Dr. Neck, has is these steps of entrepreneurship. She's a good friend of mine and a mentor of mine. So you'll see a theme running throughout of her and her influence in my work. But it just makes a whole lot of sense, right? Students need to play. Students need to experiment. Students need to learn from those experiments. That's, to me, is part of the core of entrepreneurship, right? And they can experiment with prototypes of products or services. They experiment with, how do I find customers? How do I interview customers? All those kind of things become experiments, and they learn that mentality, and they practice that mentality of, how do I set up an experiment? How do I execute an experiment? How do I debrief, reflect on, analyze an experiment, right? Tremendously valuable skills. And again, I can relate that every time. I can relate it back to, hey, you're curious about, what kind of job am I going to get? Well, now you're getting used to experiments. So how about you start to run some experiments around, what kind of job might you be interested in? How do you take that experimentation mentality and apply it to that curiosity and fear you have, right? And again, now I'm making my course extremely relevant to them in a very timely manner, right? And so then at the end of the day, right, to me, it really boils down to being willing and being able to show my students that it's absolutely okay to dream. It's okay to think big and to have these dreams and want to pursue them, right? Because they've spent a little bit of time talking about and thinking about what their purpose in life is, the thing that gives them meaning and really drives them. We've talked about things that are top of mind in terms of curiosities and fears. We've given them a lot of experiences around, customer interviewing, working with ideas, finding opportunities, experimentation, all of these things that we all know are kind of embedded in entrepreneurship education. But for me to take a step back, it really is about this idea of dream, right? Imagine what's possible, wrap it around your purpose and a sense of meaning, and then apply these tools and these mindsets that we're teaching you to those kind of things. And I think especially in the life sciences and outside of this business discipline, I think these students are so absolutely perfect for this approach, right? Because in the courses I teach and the students I work with, when they come from outside of the business disciplines, what they usually come to me with is an idea of what's meaningful to them, right? I just, I love poetry. I love art, right? Creating art or music, or, I just love chemistry and the science of chemistry and mixing, or whatever it might be. That is that first exercise of purpose and meaning. And to find students who start there, to me, is unbelievable, and it keeps me going, and it makes Mondays for me the best day of the week, because I get to go back and start working with them again. And it just makes me so excited and so thrilled to do this. So that's a little bit of my approach, right? Of my perspective. Like I said, I'll share these slides and with Andreas, and you can share them with everybody. There's some links in there, right? But teachingentrepreneur.org, again, is a very, I'm biased, but I think it's a good resource. So it's just a collection and a wide variety of very easily accessible and free lesson plans and resources for any varieties of areas of what we teach, right? So please use it and abuse it. And then for myself as well, like I said at the beginning, if I could be of service or be of help to you in anything you're doing at your school and your courses, personally, I'm happy to be that resource for anybody who would like to reach out. And I think Andres can share my email with everybody. Okay. So that's sort of my overview, right? Hopefully it kind of inspires you to think maybe a little differently about what we do and how we do it. A different way to sort of frame some of the skills and the things that that we do, so that it can be a little more effective in encouraging young people to figure out what they want to do with themselves and to position themselves to be able to accomplish that. So I appreciate your time, and I guess do a little bit of Q&A, right? Is that yes. The next thing?
So yeah, so Doan, also thank you from my side first, and I think we have went over the rainbow with this webinar series now. So we have reached the other end of the rainbow where the gold bowl is is to be hidden. Yeah, and I'm really happy that we had you today for this very inspirational talk, and I feel a little bit like a brother in mind to you after this talk, because this is really also I have a similar experience of the educational system, obviously, and I obviously also am looking for different ways to approach students and to make students engaged in what they do. In my own courses, I realized that sometimes in the bachelor they even don't know what they are looking for at the university. So the first question is, what is your interest? Yeah, I don't know. I just ended up here. So the point is to really start with their interests, and I really appreciate this approach. I'm very happy that we can now have this webinar as call for us teachers to take student-centered learning seriously, right? So it's written all over the place, and this is a perfect example. And maybe you are also having a look on the questions, right? And also on the Q&As, or there is one.
Had asked how long my courses take. So I typically teach a semester, so about 15 weeks or so. But again, the way I see things, the way I see courses and what we do is it's sort of this collection, right? And so it's a collection of experiences, and so you can sort of pick and choose. So I work with a lot of people who are, quarter system of 10 weeks, shortened, condensed 4 or 5 weeks, much longer course times, all that kind of thing. So, but no, mine is about semester long usually.
Yeah, there is also one question. How do you teach risk? Is there any special activity you do?
So no, thank you for the question. It's an interesting question. I guess I don't directly teach risk per se. I do talk to my students quite a bit about risk, and I do explain to them that in my classroom we are all taking a risk. The way that I do things tends to be very risky, and I was denied tenure at my previous institution because of the way, in large part, because of the way I do things. And so I talk to students about this, and I tell them that I take a risk in teaching the way I teach, and in executing my job the way I think I'm executing it. And so we talk about that. Right. I also let them know that they've heard things about me, through students talk. And so students tell each other, like, Winkel's class is a lot of fun. He's an easy grader. All these kind of things come through. Right. And so I tell them all that they take a risk. Right. They take a risk by coming into my class because I'm going to force them out of their comfort zone. And, the risk hopefully comes with a reward. And so I then talk to them about reward. So I don't, I guess, directly teach about risk, but it's certainly a thread that's woven throughout my course, because for 15 weeks, they're taking a risk by showing up every day.
Yeah.
Because they never know what I'm going to do.
That's a very interesting approach. So you're building in the risk into the course, of course. Yeah. And that's also something that I came across in a discussion with Andy Benaluna when we talked about entrepreneurs who are invited to present in a class. They sometimes are. Some of them might focus on the let's say, not always the positive experiences that they have during their career. And Andy said, yeah, well, that's also an experience that he has made in classes, but it's part of the journey, right? So it's not something that you should get stuck in, but you should treat this kind of phase as part of the journey. And I think that is also the risk is somehow part of the journey. And maybe we can go a little bit into what risk means. That maybe the first step out of the comfort zone, right? So there is the risk zone, maybe the next zone.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's it's all choices, right? And students make choices, we make choices. But part of what I also try to do in my role is to model things, right? To be a role model and to demonstrate and be vulnerable with the students. And so when it comes to risk, I explain to them, I've taken these risks before and I've lost. I've taken them and I've won, and I consistently take them. I'm always, I'll tell them, I've never tried this before, but we're going to try this today. And it may be a disaster, right? And again, I go, that's risky. That's risky for me because if it doesn't go well, you're not going to like it. And that's a bad thing, right? And so we talk about it.
Great.
So Jane was asking about, do you use different approaches to empower life science students in particular? I don't. I think regardless of discipline, regardless of any of these factors, right? I think it's the same. I think it's all about those things. It's all about the purpose and the meaning. It's all about the curiosity and the fear. It's all about the playing and the experimentation, regardless of what discipline they come from. I just find that some of the life science students tend to make progress a little quicker than some of the more like business students, for instance, right? And so I very much enjoy working with that population of students. So let's see, is it Mokuba? Sorry if I butcher names here. I apologize. But
Ina has also one question before. It was Ina. So she's curious about measuring effectiveness. Do you have any metrics? How do you know what they learn? Does the level of study play a role? So master, bachelor, PhD. So there's a lot of questions. Do you see?
Yeah.
So, okay.
So I will again take a risk here, and I will say that I have not ever been a big fan of research. Just my perspective. I choose to spend my time teaching with the students, and so I don't do a lot of research. I don't spend a lot of time digesting the research or conducting the research. Because I have limited time and bandwidth, and I say I'm going to choose to spend it with the students. So to answer your question directly, Ina, I have no idea. I have no idea how to measure it, and I don't care to measure it. My measure is when I sit with the students day after day after day, and I see the change in them, and I see the engagement levels, and I stay in touch with them after the course. To me, that's what matters. And I am very clear with students, right? That I am always a resource, but it's their choice to show up. And so I have students who choose not to show up. That's their choice, and it's like, if you choose not to show up, then I choose not to continue to invest in you later. That's my choice, right? I'm going to invest in the ones who show up. So that's not a typical answer from people in our discipline, from academics, but that's just how I've always kind of approached it. Different group of students, mature students or postgrads. I don't think my approach would be any different, right? I think that there would be, it would happen a little quicker, right? I do teach and work with master students, graduate level students. And this whole notion of sort of accepting and dealing with failure and processing failure and understanding purpose and things, typically, generally speaking, they seem to be a little further in the process, right? So I don't have to spend as much time setting the context with sort of older, more mature groups. But other than that, it's really about the same, right? And sometimes these notions of kind of play and experimentation, they register a much bigger impact with older audiences because it's been that much longer since they've done that. And so remembering what that's like and remembering what that feels like and the joy of doing that for somebody like me who's older can sometimes produce a much bigger effect, right? So that's kind of cool sometimes too. Let's see, Ina's got some questions here. First, mean, amazing educator who teaches plain experiments. I meet a bunch of teachers who are totally different than you. Which
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely, right. I meet a lot of different teachers who have a lot of different opinions of my opinion, and so, you know, my thing is, and my advice is to anybody is to always be authentic, right? You know, I've engaged with a lot of educators, and you know, my approach is obviously is not everybody's approach, and it shouldn't be. My approach is unique to me because I'm unique, and so, you know, I tell people all the time, if you are a very dry and boring person, you should be a dry and boring educator, because that's you and that's who authentically you are. And if you try to be something you're not, number one, students are going to figure that out pretty quick. They can see through us. We think we're smart, but we're not that smart, right? They can see through us very quickly. And so just be who you are, show up as you, and give them the best version of you, right? And within that version of you is your determination of what this entrepreneurship thing means, what it looks like and what it feels like. For me, it's very sort of real, it's very scary, it's very grounded in these sort of practices of you know, play and experimentation and all those kind of things. That's me, that's what it is for me. The colleagues I work with at John Carroll, some of them are very different, and we have to figure out how to work together. But for the students, it's a wonderful experience because they don't just get 4 of the same experience or 6 of the same experience, right? They get all these different things, and so they see different perspectives. So you know, to me, I think that's part of the joy and the pleasure. That's why I enjoy doing things like this, is because I get exposed to a lot of different people and perspectives, and I get feedback, right, that helps me to learn and grow. Because I can't get honest feedback from the students. They're not capable of giving me, for the most part, of giving me like real honest feedback on how I'm doing. And so I enjoy engaging with colleagues. What sort of students take the course? So typically in my, most of the courses I teach are at an undergraduate level, so the bachelor's level, and they're all across disciplines, right? So we have a minor that goes across campus. So it's about 50% business, and then about 50% arts and science, right? So there's the science, you know, the chemistry and physics, you know, and exercise science type students, and then there's the history and philosophy and political science. So it's a wonderful mix up of students. But I've also taught courses that are just purely business, or purely science based students. So, and typically my courses are about 30-ish, right? So they're a little smaller. I tend to stay away from the big courses. I just don't enjoy those. I can't make the connection I really want to make in a larger course oftentimes. So I've stayed away from teaching those, and I'm now at a university where we don't have those, so it's easy. It's easy for me to stay away from them.
Yeah, I'm also let's say caught by this authenticity that you are also living, yeah, and communicating.
Yep.
And my question would be, to be authentic in entrepreneurship, and I know that you are an entrepreneur also by yourself, because you're running this platform. And so how do you see this aspect of authenticity when one teaches entrepreneurship? Does this person also at least have a certain entrepreneurship activity going on by him or herself? So what is your opinion about that?
Yeah, you know, I think, I don't think it's necessary. It's not required. I think if that is a part of that person's, you know, life, I think it lends more legitimacy and authenticity to what they're doing and what they're asking students to do, right?
Yeah.
My class is a very weird thing, because the entrepreneurial endeavor I'm currently involved with and the startup that I'm currently involved with happens to be the curriculum that I teach with, right? And so I'm talking to students saying, my entrepreneurial experience is the curriculum you're using to learn about entrepreneurship. So it's this really kind of messy meta type thing, right? But no, I think if that experience is there, even if it's past, right, it just adds a level of authenticity for the students and a level of legitimacy for the students. But I don't think it's necessary. You know, and part of what I do and what I encourage people to do, regardless of how much experience they have, is to bring other voices into the classroom. I invite, people to come talk in my class. I probably bring 6 to 8 different guest speakers, every semester, and I change them up, and I make sure they're young, right? And they're young, and they're in sort of industries that are going to be appealing to the students that I have in the course. And so even if I don't have that legitimacy directly, which I do happen to have, but if I don't, that's a way to kind of do it, right? Because what's going to happen is the students are going to hear the same things from those folks that they've heard from you, and they don't believe you because you're just a teacher, right? So they're not going to believe you that it's real, because what do you know, you're a teacher, but they're going to hear it from these people, and so they believe it, and that's the ultimate goal, right?
Yeah, great.
Yeah, one other question, and again, apologies for the pronunciations here if I'm off. Theodora had asked about teaching online. Yes, so I've been teaching online for a long time, and when this whole pandemic thing happened, I personally didn't have any problems switching to online. There were some activities and things I had to change up because they, some of them require physical stuff, right? Building paper airplanes or whatever. So we had to think through and change some of those up. For the most part, the approach works online as well as it does in person. And again, to me, it's being authentic, and it's not trying to present something you're not, right? And so for me, you see it, right? I got 2 earrings. I don't wear a suit and tie. I just show up. I show up as me. Maybe I shaved, maybe I didn't. I don't really care. And the students get me. And so again, whether that's online or in a classroom, it tends to come through to the students, and they're very savvy. So if you show up as somebody else, they're going to figure it out pretty quick, and then they're not going to trust you. And so when you're asking them to step out of their comfort zone, they need to trust you a little bit that it's going to be okay, right? And if they don't trust you, if you're not authentic with them and they see through that and they don't trust you, that ask that you're asking them to do of stepping out of their comfort zone just isn't going to work very well. And so then it becomes a really kind of miserable experience for everybody involved. So that's my advice, right? And it's just figure out who you are. And if you don't know who you are, right, that's some work to do, but better late than never. And part of it can be, and I've done this with educators, part of it can be going back to that sort of purpose exercise. Like, figure out what's your purpose. Why do you do this, right? You at some point along the line have made a choice to do this. Why did you make that choice to do this, right? And what's the purpose you're looking for? And if you find that, and if you think that through, I think you'll be better at what you do.
Yeah, thank you very much. That is reminds me on the teaching manifesto that Colin Jones is asking for in his book about teaching entrepreneurship. So the first thing he invites you in this book as a teacher is write your teaching manifesto. What do you want your students to do, and why? What is your purpose of doing that? Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Another question.
You should refresh it, right? It's like the idea between business plan and business model, right? Don't just write a business plan and put it in the drawer, right? Have a business model and keep refreshing it. So have whatever you want to call it, have a manifesto, figure out your purpose. And every year, every summer I go back and I revisit it and I go, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. And this is where I find meaning in what I do. And I refresh that every year. It tends to be fairly similar for me. But for some people, it changes drastically. And certainly, as you progress through your life and I didn't have a child. Now I have a teenager. Like your life changes and things can change. And so it's worth revisiting that. And part of that journey is also part of what you can share with your students, right? And they can see you as this authentic person that has real struggles and has to deal with things in life. So Amelia was asking about students working in groups. So I think it's critically important that students experience working in groups and collaborating at their age and stage in life. So a good portion of the courses I teach are group work, but a good portion are individual too, right? And then even within the groups, right, they're having to do things individually because they need to experience all of the learning and the emotions and everything that goes along with it individually. But then the group is a place where they can sort of reflect and they can learn from each other and they can learn about how do we collaborate and move toward some sort of common goal. So I think group work is critically important. But I think there's got to be a mix, right? And so some of it's individual and some of it's group. And usually what I do is, I do a lot of the individual stuff up front, right? And then we sort of move them into some group stuff after they've been doing some individual soul searching and ideating and playing around and stuff, and they've kind of, everybody's found their lane. And then we tend to say like, okay, you all are in the similar lanes, so you guys kind of go together and do some group stuff together.
Yeah, so as we have planned to have a 1 hour setting, we have 4 minutes to go, and I'm really excited about the discussion now. And I would also have 1 or 2 more questions, as there is no one in the Q&A section. So first of all, I also like that you mentioned the word meaning. Yeah, so there is a lot of so there is at least some psychologists who say the choice for an entrepreneurship career has a lot to do with meaning. So people are looking for meaning. So Viktor Frankl and all these kind of psychological stuff, it's really about humans finding their meaning. So I liked a lot that you mentioned this word and approach. So how would you call the competence to deal with failure and fear? How would you call that competence? Is it resilience, or how would you call that?
Yes, I would call it resilience, right? And I think it's developing that, and it's building that, and it's again, that goes back to this notion of trust, right? The more that students trust you, the more willing they are to put themselves out there, to risk a little bit more, to fail a little bigger, and to build that resilience, and to lean more into that meaning, right? To put more of their time and energy into that meaning. It all goes back to trust, I think. And again, the way that you build that is through authenticity. So there are themes I keep coming back to.
Yeah.
And they don't, again, it's not necessarily about the tools you use, right? I mean, those are good, but it's really about how you approach what you do, and how you view what you do and the relationship that you have with the students that you're fortunate enough to have the opportunity to impact. It's a gift that's been given to you. And so I really encourage people to very, very highly respect that gift, and treat it well.
Yeah, so I think that we also touched upon this trust thing when it comes to the contact to the alumni or people who have been successful. So do you also have this contact that going on after the course?
Yeah,
after the courses.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Again, I always make it very clear to students, like, I got to be here no matter what. I'm showing up. You decide if you want to show up. You paid for it. If you want to pay for it and not show up, like, that's your choice, right? Those are your resources. You do what you want to do with them. So certainly for the students who show up and for the students who have a really good experience, I tend to stay in touch with them fairly closely. And throughout life, they come back and they ask me questions and they want some advice, and they just share with me, even if they're not looking for advice, they share with me what they're doing and the paths that their lives have taken. And it's wonderful, right? I mean, it's why I do what I do. And I think because I have that kind of a relationship in my classroom where we build that trust and we talk about these difficult things, meaning and failure and purpose, and these kind of weird kind of things. I think for some students, it makes a really, really big impact on them where they just feel like they want to stay in touch. And I love it. I truly, really adore having these kind of longer relationships with students where I can see what they do with their life.
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting thing. Nigel and Annie Penaluna, they also always mention this contact to their alumni and how important that is also for them to reflect on the efficiency of what they are doing, right? This is kind of measure of efficiency, basically.
Right.
So
there's nothing better than somebody saying, 5 years out, to be like, I remember when we did that thing in your class, and it was just yesterday, right? And I always kind of internalize that and go, yep, that was good. I did well, right? I was right. I did that well.
Yeah. I mean, so do you also have some kind of let's say formal way to establish this contact, or is it just everything is informal by email, just by loose personal contact? So, or do you have some kind of contact hours that you offer outside of the curriculum for this kind of exchange?
Yeah, no, it's very informal.
Okay.
And my students know that from day one. I give my students my cell phone, right? And I know that they don't like to email, they like to text and everything. You know, I give my cell phone and I go,
Mhm.
you know, contact me whenever with whatever, let me know. And I, outside of class, I spend a considerable amount of time working with students on sort of career guidance, personal growth, all that kind of stuff. It has nothing to do perceptually with entrepreneurship, right? But again, just because my students, well, one, my students know I'm going to tell them that I'm going to give them an answer. If they have a question, I'm going to tell them an answer. But I'm going to be there to help them, right?
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, so maybe there is one last question in
yeah,
the
real
chat,
quick.
the Q&A.
Theodore has a question. So I would say very few percentage-wise. You know, maybe like 5 to 10%. If I had to ballpark, I don't really keep track, but very few students do. Because it's not something most people are really cut out for. And once people realize what that career path looks like and feels like, most people don't want it, right? They want some of that security and stability, myself included. I don't do that full time. I have a full-time job that gives me some security and stability, and then I do this thing on the side because partly my wife says I need to. But no, so very few students do. I do have some. But for the most part, they're, and again, I don't teach, you know, at MIT or Stanford or the equivalents in your cultures, countries. You know, a lot of those students will go do that because they have the capacity and they have the desire. But from the schools I've been at and just the way I teach and the way I approach students, I don't typically have a lot that go out and do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But
so
and again, I can help those. But and here's the, I'm sorry, I keep going. I help those students with the same tools and techniques, and it's the same mindset and the same skill set that I help other students who work at a large corporation or a small business. It's all the same. It's the same exact things, just tweaked a little differently for context, right? But it's the same skills and the same approach to you know, creating value for others.
yeah, that's really a nice number that you mentioned, this 5 to 10%, because when we have written our, no, it's just a number, and when we have written our proposal, so of the Intrinsic project,
yeah,
we had learned from Thomas Lanz from Wageningen University to distinguish between nascent and latent entrepreneurship. So the nascent entrepreneurs are those who are already have something in mind, they're going to start
right.
their business, but we have, and that was the number he said, we have about 10% of latent entrepreneurs who are not sure about,
Right.
and they might be stimulated, but still we are also equipping the other 90% with skills that they can use in whatever professional circumstance they end up, right? So they can create value within a company, they can work in a startup or wherever, but the skills are transferable. And I think that is something that is also a very, so we are teaching life competences basically for a modern world. That's how I feel about it. And with this, I think we have reached the end of the webinar, and I think there is a lot to be done, and we could go on, I think, still for a little while. But thank you also for your questions, participants. So thanks for staying with us. And Dawn, thank you very much for this very inspiring talk. And it will be distributed to all webinar registrants of the webinar series, which is about 300 in total so far.
Great.
So we will distribute the message, and if you can also send the slides, I'm going. I could also share them with the others. So thanks a lot, Dawn. It was a great pleasure to have you here.
Absolutely.
Maybe you want to say something?
No, just thank you. I appreciate the time and the engagement, and I put my email in the chat there, but he'll share with the slides. As I tell my students, ask anything I can do to help. It's my choice whether I say yes or no. So don't take my choice away from me. If you want something, ask, and if I can't do it, I'll let you know.
Thank you very much, Dawn.